We continue this shiur in Gemara. The Gemara says that a person who's looking for a shidduch, a match, a mate, a wife, then he should particularly look for a girl, a bride that comes from a respectable family. Even if he himself is a tzadik, he himself is pure, perfect, and religious, he should not rely upon his own qualities, his own purity, in perfecting a girl who is not complete as far, not just as far as religion goes, but as far as family goes. He might even take a girl who herself is very strictly religious, but whose background is poor, and this constitutes a risk. If there is no risk, as far as she is concerned as a wife, there is a subsequent risk, which is very expensive. And here the Gemara illustrates. We take two cases, two brothers, the two holiest persons in history, the two brothers, Moshe Rabbeinu and Aharon HaKohen. Both were the greatest tzadikim out. Both married wives that were very pure, and both had children that were great tzadikim too. What was the difference? The difference was that Moshe Rabbeinu married the daughter of Yitro. Yitro was the Komer, the Pope, the leader of all idol worship at that time. Of course, he converted. He changed his belief, joined the Jewish faith, being impressed by the miracles that occurred then. And his daughter Tzipporah was given to Moshe Rabbeinu as a wife. Aharon married the daughter of Aminadav, Elisheva bat Aminadav. Aminadav was one of the leaders of the Jewish people at that time, a very great tzaddik. So the difference here was that Moshe Rabbeinu married a woman who came from a bad background, and Aharon HaKohen, his brother, married a woman that came from a very illustrious background as far as holiness is concerned. The result was that their children perhaps might be the same, but there had to be some bad seed that would come out of this in the long run. Now, there is a story of a certain person in later history. His name was Yehonatan ben Gershon ben Menashe, who unwittingly served idols, worshipped Avodah Zarah, unwittingly because he did not really mean to do that, but he worked to assist in the service of this idol worship without really believing in it. He was misled for a reason that is not important at this moment. The point is, though, that he did participate in idol worship. And there, when the Torah writes his name, it writes Yehonatan ben Gershon, son of Gershon, ben Menashe. His grandfather's name was Menashe, but in the Torah, the second letter of that word is written in a very tiny print, and it's suspended in mid-air on top of the word, which means that the name was Menashe, but that's not the name we're concerned with. If you eliminate that letter Nun, you have the word Moshe, meaning that he was a descendant of Moshe Rabbeinu, and he was an idol worshiper. Now, this proves, the Gemara says, that if a person marries a woman who comes from a bad background, a poor family background, poor spiritually, then this will show up in a future generation. If not in the children, it'll show up in the grandchildren or the third generation, but it will show up. The person wants to assure himself of having descendants that are pure, then he should marry a woman from a pure family background. Now, naturally, it stands to reason, it's understood, that we say a person will have children who are good or not good, you cannot force that issue, you cannot help the issue, because being good or bad is due only to a person's own decision. Each person has bechira, free choice, and if a person is a tzadik, it's because he himself wants to be one. If he is a rasha, it's because he himself is guilty of desiring evil, no matter what his background is, no matter what his ancestors were like. You have the case of the two brothers, Yaakov and Esav. Both had the same family background. Both were the children of Yitzchak and Rivka, the grandchildren of Abraham and Sarah, and yet one was the greatest tzaddik in the world, one was the worst rasha in the world, because the freedom of choice was there. So here what the Gemara means is that everyone, of course, has free choice, but there are certain additional items that add and affect the results. A person has free choice, but there are circumstances and atmospheres that can help him with this free choice to choose that which is good or that which is bad. Now, if a person inherits certain traits of character, for example, he might inherit kas, anger, or a hot temper. In that case, the person would have more difficulty in controlling that temper than one who inherits a serene type of nature. Both people are responsible, obligated to control their temper, never to lose it, to conduct themselves with a characteristic of kindness to all people. Yet one will have more difficulty than the other, and he would be prone to lose his temper more than the second one. So, in other words, there are factors that enter into every case that could help one way or the other. In this case, despite the fact there is free choice, if a person has a poor family background, he's going to have more difficulty in controlling that free choice, in pressing towards the side that is good and pure. And therefore, the Gemara says that a person in selecting a mate should look for the good qualities of the mate, and also family background is vital. It comes into play as far as his children and descendants are concerned. Now, the question arises, of course, as we stated, a person is better off marrying from a good background. The question here is a very sharp one. How come that Moshe Rabbeinu, the holiest person in the world, who knew about this rule, how come that he had so large a selection which to choose? Undoubtedly, every tzaddiket, the best of women alive at that time, would have been very happy to become his wife. Why did he go to such a remote corner to select a wife from a non-Jewish background? True that she converted, but still to take a convert, a non-Jewish background, rather than one that comes from a pure rabbinical background, or chacham. Why did he select one, knowing what the Gemara says here? The answer is that he was aware of the fact that the time would come when he would have to act as an emissary of Hashem, that he would become the leader of the Jews and have to deliver messages from Hashem directly to the Jews. Now, it means he would have upon him the Ruach HaKodesh, the Spirit of Hashem, the Shekhinah would rest upon him, and to the extent where, as the Torah says, that it was as though the Spirit of Hashem was the bride of Moshe Rabbeinu. And therefore, Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu, "You shall now remain with me," meaning you will have to leave your wife entirely, permanently, and attach yourself to the Spirit of Hashem. You can no longer live as a human being with your wife. You are now bound, united with the Spirit of Hashem. This Moshe Rabbeinu realized that if he's going to live that close to holiness, to have the Shekhinah upon him, he would have to leave his wife. He did not want to do this to hurt a Jewish woman, the daughter of a Jew, but he felt, since this was inevitable, at least do it to a good woman, a pure woman, but not the daughter of a Jewish family. And so he was forced to select a woman of a different faith, convert her, and hurt her a little. Of course, it's not really, in a sense, hurting her, because certainly she was happier to be his wife, even if he could not remain with her, than to be the wife of any other person on earth. Especially when the Gemara says, the Zohar Kodesh says, that for this she received so exalted a position in Gan Eden. But this was the reason why Moshe Rabbeinu deliberately went to Midian to take the wife of a non-Jew, the daughter of a non-Jew, as a wife. And of course, to convert her, one who deserved to be his wife. According to Kabbalah, naturally, there is another reason. He was compelled to take Zipporah as his wife, since she was his original Zivug in the past. In his former Gilgul, his former life, she was his wife, and when a person is reincarnated, he must resume life with his former wife. You cannot get rid of your wife that easily. Even if a person dies and goes back to this world, he's either stuck with the same one or he's fortunate in having the same one again. Now the Gemara adds, in addition to the important statement we just said about relating to selecting a wife, the Gemara says now that is something that would affect future generations. How about one's own children? How do you select a wife where you'd be assured that your children would be good, would turn out to be good? Or at least you would have a strong chance. The majority would be in your favor. You know, the key to this is that when you select a wife, investigate her brothers. Because the majority of children take after their mother's brothers, their uncles, the mother's side. Which means that a person who investigates the background of his bride's family, specifically her brothers, and sees that her brothers are good in spiritual sense, then he knows that his chances are that at least the majority of his children will turn out to be good. Because the majority of children take after the brothers of the mother. And that's why the Pasuk says that Aharon HaKohen married, Pasuk says he married Elisheva, the daughter of Aminadav, the sister of Nachshon. Why add that word, the sister of Nachshon? What's the difference whose sister she was? She was the daughter of a great person, Aminadav. Pasuk tells us this, teach us, that Aharon HaKohen not only investigated the background, her parents, her father, but also her brother especially, to know how his children would turn out. And of course that's why he had such wonderful children. The sons he had were all Kedoshim, holy. Now note that the statement says the majority of children follow the brothers of the mother, which means there is a minority too. There are exceptions to this rule, but they are a minority. And that is why we find that you can have two brothers coming from the same mother. One should be good and one not so. Because this is not a general rule that holds true in all cases. In addition, of course, to the basic fact that despite everything else, the choice is still free. But this is an important asset in helping a person to be sure that you will have good children. But always see to it that you marry the sister of a Talmid Chacham. Our brothers go to the yeshiva, they study Torah, they are good-natured, they are religious. You know that you stand a much better chance of having good sons, good children. Now, speaking about children, of course, the very first mitzvah in the Torah, the very first one, is to have children, which means, of course, to get married and to have children. That's the very first mitzvah. There are a number of reasons why this was selected as the first one. Primarily, of course, because a person is required to perpetuate the human race. A person who is born from parents would then be selfish and say he doesn't want to have any more children. That means that the human race would stop with him. If all children decided not to get married and continue having children, the world would come to an end. And that is why the first mitzvah is you were born into this world. It's your duty to continue to propagate the race, continue human life. Rabbi Arizal says that this first mitzvah of having children, of course we know that legally a person has not fulfilled the mitzvah unless he has a son and a daughter. If he has 10 daughters and no sons, he has not fulfilled the mitzvah. If he has 10 sons and no daughters, he just as well has not fulfilled it. He's supposed to have a son and a daughter. If he has only sons, the mitzvah is not complete. But he is lacking the mitzvah. He does not incur the wrath, the anger of Hashem. If one has only daughters, then this incurs the anger of Hashem. Now that would sound strange. After all, a person cannot select the sex of his children. This comes from heaven. And yet, he is still guilty. Though it would seem to be no fault of his, it is a sign from heaven that he is lacking in something vital, and this is a means of, a symbol, a sign of punishing him for it, something which does bring the anger of Hashem, as the Gemara shows from a pasuk, a sentence. Now, the Gemara says, there is another pasuk in Tehillim, which says that if a person does not leave someone on this earth after he passes away, he does not leave someone behind to take his place, and this proves that he has no fear of Hashem. He is an evil person. The Gemara says there are two rabbis who discuss this. What is meant by leaving someone on this earth to take his place? One rabbi says this refers to a son. If he has no sons, that person lacks fear of Hashem. He is not God-fearing. The second rabbi says this refers to a person who does not leave a student after he passes away, which means that every person is required, responsible to teach Torah to others. No matter how much you teach, or how little, or who the person is, if you teach him Torah, if you inform him of any chidush, anything new that he has not learned yet, this means you are teaching him. You're not required to have a special degree in teaching. Just by giving information of Torah to a second person, this constitutes teaching. And after a person passes away, he has left part of himself, part of his mentality on this earth. He continues to live through this son or student. Now, and we have an example. King David said, "Aguda ba'achayim olamim." He prayed to Hashem, may I live in both worlds simultaneously. After I pass away, when I will be living in Gan Eden, I should also live on this earth at the same time. And this means I should be zocher to have students who will repeat the words of Torah they had learned from me, and as they say these words of Torah in my name, it is as though I am living on this earth while being in Gan Eden. We find proof to this too. The case of Moshe Rabbeinu. His last words to the Jews were, he told them, I know, I could foresee the future, that after my passing, you are going to turn away from Hashem, you're going to worship idols. after my passing, he said, you'll turn away and worship idols. Now, the fact was that after Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, the Jews did not worship idols. All the years that they had Yehoshua as their leader, they were very loyal to Hashem. They were perfect, religious, and loyal. How come Moshe Rabbeinu said, Acharei moti, after my passing you'll turn away from Hashem? The answer is that after my passing means after I no longer be represented on earth. As long as my student Yehoshua is alive, it means that I am still there on earth with you. So after my passing means after the passing of my student Yehoshua, then I know you'll turn away from Hashem, which is what actually happened. We see from there that when a person's student is alive, though he has passed away, it's as though he is living in the body of that student. So when that student speaks words of Torah, it is as though he himself is speaking because it's in the name of his rabbi. This is one point. Secondly, we see from here something that might be difficult for some to grasp, and yet it is so true. The Gemara says that a student who is anxious to learn Torah, he's very anxious, he makes a lot of sacrifices, he leaves home or he travels great distances, he thirsts for these words of Torah. He goes through all expenses and all sacrifices. He finally comes to a class, he listens to his rabbi teaching words of Torah, and he feels, I have accomplished a great deal. I have shown my desire, my anxiety to study. The Gemara says, if that student thinks he is anxious to hear the words of Torah from his rabbi, more so than the rabbi wants to teach, he's mistaken. Because as much as he wants to learn, the desire of his rabbi to teach him is far greater. Because the rabbi is very anxious, very concerned about the spiritual, even physical welfare of his students. So much so that Moshe Rabbeinu said this, meaning after my passing means after the passing of Yehoshua. Why? Because Yehoshua I consider as myself, as part of me. My love for him is so great that as long as he is alive, I am alive because he and I are one. And that's why we find in the Zohar Kadosh, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Arizal said, I had a rabbi, my official rabbi was Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was the holiest rabbi that ever lived, the only one that's comparable to Moshe Rabbeinu. And yet Rabbi Akiva had so many students, 24,000 students, that all died. Why did they die? Because there was no mutual respect among them. In my case, Rabbi Yochai Arizal said, I have taught respect and affection among my students. Among the students themselves, and between rabbi and students too. In the Zohar Kadosh, we always find that when the students came to Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Arizal, they always addressed them as the Rechinai Denafshai, which means the beloved ones of my soul. More than a heart could like a person, a soul feels emotion much deeper. As he said, my soul feels a deep love for every one of you. This is the ahava that a rabbi has for students. And of course we find too, Rabbi Arizal brings a statement of David HaMelech that the greatest proof that a student could show in his love for his rabbi is Nifleta ahavat chali mehavat nashim, that it is natural, physical nature, that a man would show a deep ahava, a liking for a woman, for his wife, a woman that he likes very much. And that's a natural tendency, a physical tendency in a human being. But this type of love is surpassed in a deeper sense in a student to a rabbi when that relationship is a deep, pure one. So this is the kind of relationship between Moshe Rabbeinu and Yehoshua, where he said that as long as Yehoshua is alive, I am alive, because he and I are one. We are so closely united, so bound together, that we are actually one body, one person. And that's why the Gemara says now, that a person who does not leave behind after his passing someone to take his place. To take his place means as though he is there, and that person shows no fear of Hashem. He must leave someone after his passing, either in the form of a son or a student. Then the Gemara says that, let us find out, these two rabbis were Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shimon Levi. Let us find out which statement Rabbi Yochanan made. Rabbi Yochanan said once, he went around to different yeshivot, carrying with him a bone. And he said he moaned the fact that this bone is the remains of my 10th son. I had 10 sons, and every one of those 10 died. I'm left without children. If Chas v'Shalom, a person's children died during his lifetime, he has not fulfilled the mitzvah of having children. So he said, woe is to me that I have had 10 sons, every one of the 10 died. This is the last bone I have. This bone, of course, was not, I think that was tameh, it was the tooth, the Mepharshim should say. Bone of my 10th son. And how can I face my Creator? How can I be consoled when this pasuk says that it is so bad to leave the world without children? Of course, from this statement, we can prove that Rabbi Yochanan did not say that this pasuk refers to a son, because Rabbi Yochanan knew he was God-fearing. He knew that he was pure and religious. So he must be the one who said that one who is not God-fearing is one who does not leave behind a student. And we mentioned before, it is worthy of mentioning again. This is said in the Gemara. In the Zohar HaKadosh, we find a very pathetic story of Rabbi Yochanan addressing all his students, and he broke down and cried and said, how bitter is my lot that the very first mitzvah in Torah, I worked so hard to fulfill this mitzvah. I had 10 sons, and the misfortune that struck me in having every one of my 10 sons die. What consolation can I have? The Zohar HaKadosh says that his students rose up as one and said to Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi, we are your consolation, because you taught us Torah, and the Torah says, the Gemara says, one who teaches a person Torah, and it is as though he gave birth to that person. We are your sons. Yochanan replied, this is no consolation at all. You are my students, but you are not my sons in a true physical sense. It is ki'ilu yodo, as though he gave birth to them, but it is still not a son. It is still not the actual mitzvah, because I have not increased the human race, and I have not brought new life into this world. I have not fulfilled the mitzvah. I do not have legally a son that I can be credited with. And so he continued to cry until the Zohar HaKadosh says that one old man rose up. This old man probably was Eliyahu Hanavi, the form of an old man, or it was one of the great rabbis of the past who had passed away and always returned to these yeshivot in the form of an old man, a sabbat. He rose up and said to Rabbi Yochanan, I will console you. I will state a pasuk in the Torah. This pasuk, it says, Ko Amar Hashem. So says Hashem. Asarisim Asher Yishmeru. Not just to one like you, who has had children and who has lost them, but also to those men who are unfortunate. They could not have children due to natural causes. They are physically sterile. What can they do about that mitzvah? To all these Hashem says, you who cannot have children, or who have had children and died, and I tell you that if you will observe my Shabbat properly, properly means to the perfect degree, "V'natati lachem yad vashim," I will give you a place among my exalted position in Gan Eden, among the most righteous, tov mibanim u'banot, better, higher than the mitzvah of having sons and daughters, because the mitzvah of Shabbat is so great that this stands above the mitzvah of children. Now first, let's try to really analyze this and understand it. There's no further explanation in the Zohar Kadosh, but it can be understood in conjunction with a second statement. The observing of Shabbat means that a person should fulfill this mitzvah from the moment Shabbat begins, which means from Friday evening, to allow the proper time before Shabbat begins, before sundown, to be dressed with the Shabbat clothes, ready to receive the Shabbat queen. And then to spend the entire Shabbat in Kedusha, in action and in thought. The laws of Shabbat are such that certain types of acts are forbidden. You're not allowed to do certain type of work, perform certain type of acts like sowing, planting, cooking, writing, and so on. But you also have to guard your tongue, not to speak words, not evil words, but words that are spoken during the weekdays. Any topic of business or any topic of weekday matters is forbidden, should be avoided on Shabbat. A person who will guard his actions and his tongue and his thoughts on Shabbat, that person is considered carrying out the mitzvah of Shabbat completely, in its entirety. Of course, that's in a negative sense. He should not do such. He should not speak the wrong things. At the same time, in a positive sense, he should concern himself on Shabbat only with that which is holy, which means through the prayers of Shabbat, the study of Torah during its free hours, and seeing that the meal he eats should be with holiness, with purity. Eat the best type of food possible. Make sure it's the richest type of food. Eat it with relish, with good appetite. Enjoy it. Enjoy it fully. You're committed to enjoy it, but at the same time, the kavanah, your intention should be that this is for the honor of Shabbat. So that in most Jewish homes you'll find that as they are about to partake of the different courses of Shabbat, they say first the words, the kavod Shabbat. This fish, this soup, this meat, I'm eating in honor of Shabbat, the Shabbat queen. Now, why would this be considered better than having children? Or why even equal to having children? Why not the mitzvah of Shabbat plus the mitzvah of having children? The answer is that the Shabbat really represents the Shekhinah, the Spirit of Hashem. Because Shabbat Melkitah means Sabbath Queen. The Queen of what? Who's Queen? If Shabbat is the Queen, who is the King? And the answer is that Hashem is the King, Shabbat is His Queen. Respect the Queen, that means you're respecting the King. Now, since Shabbat is the Queen, that means that Shabbat represents the Shekhinah, the Spirit of Hashem. The Shekhinah is called a Queen too. Just as Moshe Rabbeinu was credited with the mitzvah of having children, though he left his wife, because he attached himself to the Shekhinah, and therefore too, a person who observes Shabbat so meticulously, it means his attachment to the Shekhinah is on the same level as Moshe Rabbeinu, and he is credited with the mitzvah just as Moshe Rabbeinu was. That is why the Zohar Kadosh says that when this Sabbath, this old man, gave this reply to Rabbi Yochanan smiled and said, I have finally found consolation. You have fully consoled me. Another Gemara says that Yeshua ben Levi, the second rabbi, it would seem that the second rabbi would say then that the replacement for him would be the son, since Rabbi Yochanan says the replacement is a student. Gemara says that's impossible too, because the second rabbi, Yeshua ben Levi, stated that he would never visit a house of mourning except in the case of one who died without having children. A person dies and has children, that means that person is complete. He is a tzadik. Now, why would you visit that person's home and cry over the passing of that person? There is no tragedy. The person who died is better off. He's leaving a world of agony and suffering, going to a world of permanent happiness and bliss, to get in it. So we can't cry, this poor person has died, what a pity it is, he's left his life here. That person, as Rabbi Arizal says, that person is laughing. Rabbi Arizal, a story is written of Rabbi Arizal who was looking out of the window and saw a funeral procession going by. His daughter was next to him, and they saw the family going behind the funeral car, all of them crying very bitterly, "Oh, our father." Rabbi Arizal laughed and said, "These people are crying so bitterly for this person lying in the funeral hearse, while he lying there is laughing at them. He is saying, you're crying for me. The pity is upon you because you remain in this bitter world, this world of so much anguish and suffering. I'm going to where there's no longer any suffering, the world of happiness." So that there's no sense in crying over a person who is good, who's left this world. Whom should we cry for? A person who has left this world without children. On that person there is really a deep, bitter pity. Now, from this statement we would understand that Yeshua ben Levi, who would cry over one who has no children, he would truly not cry over a person who is not considered God-fearing. So therefore we must say that he too considers one who is not God-fearing, one who does not leave students behind. So that means that both therefore agree. The main thing a person should leave behind is students. Children, perhaps a person cannot help. It would be physically impossible for some. But every person can help and see that he has students left behind. Share your knowledge with someone else, and you have created a student. Carry on his knowledge, and that student will carry it on after you. And that way, you'll be considered alive even after passing. You'll be considered living in both worlds simultaneously. Even it says one thing more, we have the comparison between David HaMelech and Yoav. King David and his general Yoav. Yoav was a very loyal general who fought all the wars for King David. He was the most powerful general practically of all time. He was extremely loyal to King David. Yet when King David died, passed away, it says Shechivah. It doesn't say he died, it says he was laid to rest. Yoav, it says, he died. Dying means that he left completely. He's not resting. Even it says the difference is that King David passed away and left a son who could take his place. So it meant that he could lay and rest completely. He could be laid to rest. There was no worry in his passing. Yoav, who did not leave a son that was of his level, his character, his degree, could not really rest in peace. And that's why a person should see to it to teach his children, to instruct them, to inspire them with every type of good quality possible. And knowing he has left a good child behind, he can then be laid to rest with a mind at peace. More important than leaving behind an inheritance, wealth for a child, is leaving behind the knowledge, the spirit in a child, knowing that child will carry on the true spirit of the Torah. The Gemara says that a person who has someone in his family who is suffering or who is ill, what is the best advice for that person? What should he do? Should he go to a doctor? Should he go to shul, pray? Where should he seek help? The Gemara says there is one advice that's above all. He should go to a chacham, to a learned person, to a tzadik, and ask him to pray for the sick person. Because that's the one item that is sure to help. There's a posek in the Torah which says, by King Solomon, Chamat melech malachei mavet, the anger of the king results in messengers of death, v'ish chacham yichabrena. And a chacham, Talmid chacham, tzadik, will erase this anger. So if the anger of Hashem is upon a person, where that person is suffering or even destined to die, then the prayers of a tzaddik can erase that anger, that decree from heaven, and the person can be given a new life. This is what the pasuk says. We find that the Tanzel's interpretation of this pasuk is most amazing, how well it fits into these words. Rabbi Tanzel says, there is a pasuk in the Torah, Yikara hi lepninim. The Torah is more precious than pearls. Knowledge of Torah is more precious than pearls. Why not say more precious than diamonds? Why does it use the word lepninim? The Gemara says because this means, panim means inside. Peninim means the inside of the inside. Extreme interior. What is the extreme interior that is so difficult to penetrate, to get into? That is the Holy of Holies, the room of the Bet HaMikdash that only the Kohen Gadol can enter into. This is the most difficult room to get into. Only the Kohen Gadol can get there, and even he only once a year on Yom Kippur. This means then that the words of Torah are more precious than Peninim, greater even than the power of a Kohen Gadol that goes into this inner sanctum of the Bet HaMikdash. Now, Rabbi Tanzel says this would teach us something, a very clear point. Because why does the Kohen Gadol go into this room? What's the purpose of him going into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur? To evoke a blessing from heaven, to bring down upon the Jews a kapara, a forgiveness for their sins. All Jews during the year committed sins. He goes in there to the Holy of Holies to pray to Hashem and to return with this forgiveness by Hashem, this kapara, for the sins of the Jews. This is the power of the Kohen Gadol, only on Yom Kippur, in the Holy of Holies. This means then that the Kohen Gadol is higher than any other person out. He can affect something that is so powerful and to cure the souls of all the Jews at one time. Yet the Gemara adds that it is true that Yom Kippur forgives for the sins of the Jews, but there are certain sins that are so serious that even if a person does Teshuva, he repents, and he has the day of Yom Kippur, everything is complete, this sin is so great that it cannot be forgiven. This sin can be forgiven only through a person's death. It's the only thing that can erase this sin. So here we see this point. The pasuk says, Chamat melech malachei mavet. The anger of Hashem at times is so serious that it brings down the angel of death, something which even the Kohen Gadol cannot receive a forgiveness for, because he can get those sins forgiven in Kippur that only Kippur can forgive for, but not that which requires death. Yish chacham, but a tzadik, yichaprene, can erase even this anger which brings death to a person. He is greater than Peninim, greater than the Kohen Gadol that goes into this inner sanctum, and that's why if a person has one who is sick in his family, where he is in danger, his life is in danger, the key to it is, the Gemara says, go to a tzaddik, let him pray for you because he can receive a cure even when that person is destined to die. This is the koach of the tefillah of tzaddikim, and it is dependent upon a person's faith in these tzaddikim. If we have that emunah, then we are certain to receive the blessings, prayers of these tzadikim, and to be zochet to the Biyat Mashiach Tikuney Zohar Rigash Amen. Amen. We continue the shiur in a minute. The minute says, when Yehoshua was occupied in dividing the land, remember that the Jews entered into Israel, they battled with 31 kings in Israel till they completed the victory. It took 7 years of battle, and then the dividing of the land took another 7 years. Now, each tribe was given a special part of Eretz Yisrael. One tribe came to Yehoshua and said to Yehoshua, we have a very large population. We'd like to have special consideration for that. Yehoshua replied to them, this is a pasuk there in the David, replied to them, if you are a large population, don't ask for more land. Just go to a place where you can hide out well. Stay hidden. What does that mean? What was the reason of saying hide yourselves? If they have a large population, they should stay out in the open. They're not afraid of anything. Population means they have a large army. They can defend themselves against anyone and anything. So why should they hide themselves? Here we come to a topic which we have discussed previously a number of times, the topic that is brought up many times in the Gemara, and here again the Gemara speaks about this topic with a new point of information added, a very vital one. Yeshua told them that there definitely exists that which is known as ayin hara. Ayin hara means evil eye. A person could look at someone with an evil eye and actually harm him. That has always existed, that exists until today. Evil eye, generally, in most cases, or let's say practically all cases, is an eye that is jealous. A person is jealous of someone else and looks at this person with a covetous eye, an eye that begrudges, then this eye carries with it, or delivers, an invisible attack upon the person who is being stared at, and this person can actually be harmed physically. This can bring about a physical harm. This evil eye is something that we cannot really tell which person has this power, which person has that much deep jealousy within him that he can disseminate this jealousy into something which can actually cause physical harm. And that is why a person must be cautious, must beware of this evil eye in any form, because you never know when it may strike. How does a person hide from this? Simply by not displaying anything special. If you have something very expensive and very good looking, don't show it off. Because when you show it off, you're bound to bring out jealousy among those people who begrudge you. So in order to be assured of not being hurt by the evil eye, never show off something which is especially nice. The person who has a child, a small child who's very talented, much more than the normal case, or a child that's extremely good looking, and they show this child off, they boast about this child showing it off, and suddenly the child falls ill, chas v'shalom. It's because among the people that saw this child, there was one who felt this deep sense of resentment as to why this person should have a child that is so nice and that one isn't. This resentment, this jealousy brought out the evil eye in that person, and so the child was actually harmed. The child could fall sick, or in some cases, has to show much worse can happen to that child. Now here, Yeshua said to the tribe of Menachem, you have so large a population, people looking would say, Li ayin hara. You say, good, it means Shala. The ayin hara means that no ayin hara, no evil eye should befall you. Look at that vast number. Person saying, Li ayin hara, or in Yiddish you say, Kenai nahara, no ayin hara should strike you, but there are those who will not say it. There are those who are that jealous that they will want the ayin hara, evil eye to strike. And that is why Yeshua said, hide out. If you hide, they don't see openly such a large number, and then you will not be harmed. If you hide, you are hidden from view. Now here, it pays to point out something. Let's first see their answer, and we'll point out something which Rabbi Arizal speaks about, and is brought to the Ramban, and we wouldn't speak about it except that Rabbi Arizal does speak about it in his Sefer, the Shvachei Haran, Sefer that we have here in English too. As long as it's been brought open, then we can speak about it openly. The answer of these people, the tribe of Menachem, was, we do not fear the evil eye. We are immune to it, because we are descendants of Yosef HaTzadik. Yosef HaTzadik had the blessing from his father, Ben Porat Yosef, Ben Porat Alei Ayin, the son of beauty. Yosef was extremely handsome, more handsome than any person in the world. This is what caused the wife of Potiphar to desire him that much, to try to seduce him. And despite this handsomeness could surely bring in Ayin Hara, an evil eye. He was blessed, Alei Ayin, you are above the power of the evil eye. You cannot be harmed by it. Now, why was Yosef HaTzadik greater than the evil eye? Because he was above the evil eye, since he was compared to, he was blessed with the blessing, you shall be fruitful as the fish of the sea. Just as the fish of the sea are covered by water, they have a constant covering over them, and this is a protective covering, so too does Yosef HaTzadik have a covering over him too. A covering which will block the evil eye from striking. In one sense, this means you are like fish in the water, because being a tzaddik, of course, he occupied himself with the study of Torah. We always use the simile of water to Torah. Just as fish cannot live without water, so too can a Jew not live without Torah. The waters of Torah, the sea of learning, the sea of Talmud. So, therefore, we use that word fish and water to show that Yosef HaTzadik was so great in Torah, that the Torah protected him against the evil eye. Second point, taking it from a physical point, this is a very big chidush. As I said, we mention this because it has already been revealed openly. It was sort of hidden place in the Ramban, but since Rabbi Arizal speaks about it openly, we can't speak about this openly too. An actual example. It's an example that we should not look for, but we know that it does exist. The example of the evil eye. As we said, evil eye pertains to an eye that is jealous. It also pertains to an eye that is tameh, impure. Impure can be a person who is tameh himself. Let's say in the days of the Bet HaMikdash, the person touched a rodent or a corpse, he became tameh, impure. He could not enter into the holy temple until he was purified. Through mikveh, through the sprinkling of the ashes of the red cow, and so on. We have the laws of Tum'ah today also. a specific law of Tum'ah is a nidah. A woman who is a nidah, that is during the time of her period, she is considered nidah. We're speaking about a woman who is married. She's a nidah until she becomes purified and goes to the mikveh. The immersing herself in the mikveh purifies her to the point where she may again be with her husband. The word nidah means separated. During that period of time, she must be separated from her husband. She is tameh, and if there's any relation between herself and her husband, this would contaminate the children to become pagum. Above all, there is a death penalty for it. Karet. Same as, let's say, in the other laws, Shabbat and so on. This is what's known as Taharat Mishpacha, or family purity. This family purity is necessary to give birth to children that are pure, so that during that stage she is nidah, she is impure. This does not mean that she is sinful, she is bad. This is a physical attribute to the case of women. It's a phenomena of its own that takes place in a woman. She's not to blame at all, chas v'shalom, but she is given that law of impurity. Even it says, on the contrary, that the law of nidah was made for the sake. Why was this law given in the first place? It's not a chok, a law where the reason is not revealed. The reason is given clearly in the Torah. Why was this law of nidah made by Hashem? Aside from, of course, deeper hidden reasons that we're not aware of in Kabbalah. But the simple reason that this law is given by Hashem was because nothing is more important than shalom bayit, peace between husband and wife. One of the greatest mitzvot that exists, the mitzvah that is so great that a person can receive reward during his lifetime plus everlasting reward Gan, double reward, both for this world and the next, is if he performs the great mitzvah of bringing peace between husband and wife. If there is a rift, a controversy between them, and he makes peace between them, he is blessed to such extent that he has reward here and in the hereafter. So important it is to have shalom bayit. Hashem says to every bride and groom, as you get married, if you're going to live in peace between yourselves, then rest assured that I will be with you too. In your home, the Shekhinah will be found, the Spirit of Hashem will be found. And that is why the Gemara says you take the combination of man and wife. In Hebrew is ish is man, isha is woman. The letters found in those two words, in ish you have the letter yud, in isha you have the letter hey. Together that's yud k, or Hashem's name. So when man and woman are together, that means they're not separated because of battle. Hashem is there. If they are separated, Hashem says, I withdraw my name from you, I will not be with you. Take out the letter Yud from Ish, the letter Hey from Isha, and you have Esh and Esh, which is fire and fire, which will consume, destroy the home. So much does Hashem desire peace between man and wife, that Hashem says, if you have that peace, your house is a Bet HaMikdash in itself, I will rest with you. Now, because of that, Hashem says that this case of Shalom Bayit is one that should exist throughout the lives of a couple. Now let's take the what is natural or normal. A bride and groom, when they are engaged before marriage, they are generally, in normal cases, they are generally very much infatuated with each other. There's a deep liking, basic ahava and excitement that fills them preparing for the wedding, and they feel that with such an infatuation, such a proximity and closeness, they could live through their entire lives in happiness. Yet, it is normal that after the wedding, after the so-called honeymoon, this wears off. And in a short period of time, they stop having this feeling for each other. They begin to argue. They have other things that concern them. There's no more question of going out and having a good time. They begin to work on each other's nerves. The physical desire that is present at the time of the wedding becomes lessened with time. And whereas before there was a mutual desire for each other, becomes lessened and it is gone after a while. For example, if I should give this example, you take a child, or you take even a grown-up who cannot afford a certain type of food. Let's take the case of a child with ice cream. If you give a child ice cream, he's overjoyed. He'll thank you for it, he'll appreciate it. Come back the next day and give it to him again, he'll appreciate it again. Come back the next week, again, he'll always be excited over it. But if you should give this child ice cream in the morning, and then again for lunch, and for supper, he'll enjoy it these 3 times. The next day too. But continue feeding any child ice cream 3 times a day, or more, there will come a time in a not too distant future when he'll tire of it. Give him ice cream 3 times a day, the excitement will wear off after a week, and in a few weeks he'll tire of it completely and say he doesn't want this ice cream anymore. You ask him what you were so excited over the ice cream before, and he says this wore off, he doesn't want ice cream anymore. So what he was crazy about, now he tires to the point where he completely refuses it. The same thing holds true with a husband and wife. A bride and groom get married. They're very excited about each other, but living together for a period of time, this excitement wears off. The ahava wears off too. They tire of each other, and they find that there is no desire. They have no desire one for the other. What does this do? This destroys the shalom bayit, the peace at home. Therefore, Hashem gave us this mitzvah of nidah, so that the wording in the Gemara is exactly so that a person after a couple, after many years of marriage, it could be 10 or 20 years after marriage, they should feel the same ahava, the same excitement, the same infatuation as they did at the day of the chuppah, the day of the wedding. Now, how is this done? Because the law of nidah is that each month there's a compulsory separation between husband and wife for a period of time, a certain number of days, and until that period of time is over, they must be completely separated physically, and then she goes to the mikveh, and they can resume relations. Now, this means that by nature, they tire of each other after a while. They get tired, they are forced to separate. It doesn't bother them the first day or so. But they find that as time goes by, they begin to miss each other, and they cannot wait for the day when they can resume being together. Each month this transpires, this takes place, and so it brings about a case where each month, approximately, it is like a new wedding date with them, a renewed, exciting moment, and that's how we have a constant shalom bayit, peace at home, in Jewish family life, pure Jewish family life. Of course, there are still rifts and arguments. Even as if there's a shortage of money in the house, you cannot avoid battles. You might have peace at night and war by day. But at least, basically, there is this shalom bayit that is brought about through this law of nidah. And we brought this out to point out that you do not, the word nidah, tameh, a woman is tameh, is not because of a sin in her part, and it is not a wrongdoing, and there is a basic reason for this mitzvah. Still, legally, she is tameh. Now, being tameh means, again, that the eye is tameh too. The eye disseminates a look of tum'ah, a look of hara, of evil, ayin hara. Evil not intentionally, but that is basically there. Therefore, the Ramban reveals this, and as we said in the Arizal Sefer, you'll find this mentioned, that when a nidah looks into a mirror, then if you look very closely, you will find on the mirror a speck of blood. Very tiny speck, but you will find it there. She stares into the mirror. This happens only in the case of Nida. But this illustrates very clearly the power of Ayin Hara to this extent. And in that case, too, if you have anything blocking that mirror, let's say a painted glass or a tissue that is transparent, the mirror will remain clean and pure because the power of the Ayin Hara is blocked and no harm can come to the item that the eye is directed at. That's why in this case, this is the answer of the Bnei Menashe, the tribe of Menashe, who said, we come from Yosef tzadik, about whom it is said that he is like the fish of the sea, who will have this protective covering of water. We too have a protective covering, the spiritual covering of a tzadik, of Torah, the waters of Torah, and therefore we are immune to an Ayin Hara. Hence, we are not afraid to live openly. We don't have to hide, although we are so large in numbers. And if somebody begrudges us, looks at us askance, we fear nothing as far as Ayin Hara is involved. Now, we're going to come to a case later on, that Arizal speaks too, about other means of protection against the Ayin Hara, or a natural means of protection. A person can be born with an immunity too. It's a separate topic in itself. As we said, the Gemara stresses here. The Gemara asks, why is all this brought up? Why speak about this? Why mention it in general? The Gemara says it is an Eitzah Tovah. The Torah gives us good advice. It lets us know good advice. You may take the advice, or you may refuse it. A wise person will take the advice of Torah. That every person should be careful, at least be cautious. You don't have to watch yourself constantly, but where possible, be careful and try to avoid that Ayin Hara. That is the good advice of the Torah. Now the Gemara discusses a case that is brought in the Chamesh. Interesting court case, also referring to the same topic. In dividing the land of Israel among the tribes, everyone received his nachala, his inheritance. Every Jew inherited a portion of the land. The land was portioned out among the tribes, so every family in each tribe received a portion of land. In the laws of inheritance, Nachala Ayurusha, the Torah says that if a father passes away, then his possessions, his wealth, are inherited by his sons. Inheritance is for sons only. When we're speaking about Torah law, if to some it may sound strange, different than secular law, the Torah law states that the only ones that inherit a father are his sons. The wife inherits nothing, the daughters inherit nothing. Of course, there is provision made for the wife and the daughters. Naturally, they have all their needs taken care of. But the direct inheritance is given to the sons, and then there's provisions for the wife and daughters. Now, the problem is, what if a man has no sons? What happens then? Where does this inheritance go to? Then we have a long series of laws as to who is next in line. What happens if there are no sons? You have a whole long series of laws in the whole chapter of the Gemara, and a whole section of Hebrew, called the Hebrew law, and that Shulchan, discussing that. In this case, in the Chumash we find one question brought up. A story told, just a few sentences, where it was just at the end of the 40 years of the desert, Moshe Rabbeinu had brought the Jews to the point of crossing the Jordan to go into Eretz Yisrael. He was going to bid them farewell and leave the rest, the entry to Yerushua. At that moment, the Torah says that 4 sisters came before Moshe Rabbeinu, who was the chief rabbi, the judge of the Jews, and they said, we have a problem we'd like you to rule on. They told him this story. These were the daughters of Tzlafchad. They said, our father Tzlafchad died in the desert. He was one of the Jews that died in the desert during the 40 years that the Jews wandered. He left no sons. He left only daughters. Now, the problem is, if he left daughters, what's going to happen to his inheritance? Who is supposed to get it? This is the question they placed before Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu said, wait, and I will receive the answer from Hashem. This is a law which I must get the answer through, directly from Hashem. At all times, he was able to speak to Hashem directly, so there was no question of whether he'd get the answer or not. We'll come to the answer in a moment. First, let's analyze these 4 daughters and their father. They were the daughters of Tzlafchad. Who was Tzlafchad? Even it tells us the case of Tzlafchad is very controversial. There are different opinions in the Gemara about who Tzlafchad really was, and it appears that the majority would agree that they said their father died in the desert, a special case of death. It is the opinion of most that he was the Mikoshish Eitzim, case where in the desert, the Torah tells us that a man was caught gathering wood on Shabbat, carrying wood on Shabbat. And carrying in the street is breaking Shabbat. That's one of the 39 acts of Shabbat is you're not allowed to carry outside. The penalty for breaking Shabbat is Sekilah, death by stoning. He was taken in, this man who was carrying wood was taken before Moshe Rabbeinu, and again, he said, wait for the decision. Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu, take this man out, and have him stoned to death. Tzlafchad was stoned to death because of being Mechalel Shabbat, he violated the Shabbat, and that was it. Now, the daughters came before Moshe and said, our father died in the desert, as though they were proud of it. He violated a law that was equivalent to murder, which is also a death penalty, or equivalent to idol worship, the same level of death penalty. In fact, the penalty of death for murder is on a lesser scale than that of breaking Shabbat. So why did they bring this up as though they were proud of it? The Mefedesh should explain that Tzlafchad was really a tzadik, a very great tzadik. The Zohar Kadosh says that he was pure. Some opinions, he was so pure he never committed a sin in his life. He died only because of the original curse that all people must die. He was completely pure. But if so, wouldn't these statements contradict the statements that it is written in the Gemara that he violated the Shabbat? The answer is, this was also done as an act of purity. At the time, this was 40 years before the daughters came to Moshe Rabbeinu, which means the first year the Jews were in the desert. What happened? In that first year, spies were sent to Eretz Yisrael, 12 spies. 10 of them came back with a negative report speaking against Israel, and because the Jews accepted this negative report and rebelled against Moshe Rabbeinu, cried out to go back to Egypt, go back to slavery, rather than go to Eretz Yisrael. Therefore Hashem said, for this they shall be punished. All Jews will die during the period of 40 years. Because the spies spent 40 days in Israel, The Jews must pay a year for a day, and during these 40 years, every single Jew in this generation over the age of 20 shall die for this sin. Now, what do the Jews figure? They're going to die anyhow. What good is living as a Jew anymore? They're going to die. They knew this curse was a true one. Here they'd come to the desert. They had received the Torah from Mount Sinai with the assurance they're going to Israel to live a life of glory and happiness. So now that they've gotten this decree from heaven they're going to die, they might as well drop the laws of Torah. This could have caused the complete disintegration of the Jews. This Slavchad saw, and Slavchad decided to sacrifice himself for the sake of Torah, for the sake of having the Torah obeyed by the Jews, to set himself up as an example. And so he deliberately violated the Shabbat and allowed himself to be caught, brought out, stoned to death, that the Jews should see that they are responsible for obeying the mitzvot of the Torah. That was his good intentioned act. Now, it's a very good intentions. Again, the Mepharshim ask, the commentaries ask, it's very admirable because he thereby spared so many other Jews from the same sin. It taught them that they still must abide by the law strictly. Even still, isn't there a question, how could he himself have broken the Shabbat? Even if you want to teach a lesson, there are different ways of doing it, not by committing a sin that is considered the most serious of all sins possible. The answer is that he allowed himself to be killed unjustifiably. Because what did he do? He carried this wood in the street, on the road, openly. If you carry anything on the road for 4 cubits, then you have broken the Shabbat. If you carry something just for 1 or 2 steps, you have not broken the Shabbat. It's a minor infraction, but the Shabbat is not broken. So what did he do? He carried this wood 2 steps, he stopped, and he carried 2 more steps, and these are not combined. You don't combine the 2, which means that he did not carry this 4 steps. It was only 2 and 2, but he did it in a manner where people could not detect that he had stopped. So actually, he did not break the Shabbat. In the eyes of others, they thought he did. He allowed himself to be taken in, let them testify that he had broken the Shabbat, die innocently, but his death would bring about a strengthening out of the mitzvot of Torah. This was his act. So again we see his pure intentions and the fact he did not break Shabbat. And therefore the Zohar Kadosh says that Slavchad committed a crime of disrespect to Hashem. Not that he broke Shabbat, disrespect, meaning that it was sort of a chilul Hashem. It was a disgrace. People would see someone like him breaking Shabbat, they get a bad impression. So there was this act that was disrespectful, in that they thought he broke Shabbat. There was no actual violation of Shabbat, but this disrespect was superseded by his intentions of saving the Jews from sin. At any rate, this was Slavchad. This is only one of many explanations about him. It's a long topic just speaking about Slavchad alone. But we understand now when these daughters of Slavchad came to Moshe Rabbeinu, and they said to Moshe Rabbeinu, we are the daughters of Slavchad. We have a problem. He left no sons. What happens to his inheritance? Moshe Rabbeinu came back with a reply from Hashem that if a man dies without leaving any sons, who is next in line to inherit his wealth, his possessions? His daughters. Not the wife, but the daughters. They are next in line. Therefore, he said to these daughters, when they divide the land, that you will receive the portion of land that he was supposed to have gotten. This seemed to have ended the problem. But the Torah says a second problem arose. Now the tribe of Menashe came before Moshe Rabbeinu and said that this is a temporary solution. Because what will happen further? We want to be certain that each tribe is given a certain portion of land and never loses that portion. Yet there is a rule that whatever a woman owns becomes the property of her husband when she gets married. Completely becomes his property. Now these daughters of Tzlavchad, they are inheriting a portion of land that belongs to the tribe of Menashe. If they should get married to any Jew, best Jew, but outside of this tribe of Menashe, what will happen? This land will be transferred over to a different tribe. Menashe's land will become lessened. A different second tribe will have more land, part of our land. Is that fair? Moshe Rabbeinu said, fine, the solution for this is that the daughters of Tzlavchad must marry only members of their own tribe, and this will solve the problem for good. Now, we'll come back to one point a little later, the point about the age of the daughters of Tzlavchad. We must state factually that they were 40 years old when this problem came up. If they married immediately, they were still at least 40 years old. These four were not married. They got married at the age of 40 or over 40. We'll come back to that point later. It's a very vital point. First, the Gemara tells us two things, two interesting points. Note that when the daughters of Tzlavchad came and asked Moshe Rabbeinu this law, what if a father has no sons? As in our case, who gets the inheritance? Moshe Rabbeinu said, wait here, and we'll ask Hashem. Why did he give him the answer himself? It's a question just as well as any other law. Every law in the Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu taught to the Jews. Torah Tzivela to Moshe. Why at this point did he hesitate and he wasn't certain? The Gemara answers that because the Torah wanted to have credit given to the daughters of Tzlavchad, that at least this one law was written in the Torah as credit to them. Note that in general, women in those days were pure, more pure than men. Women took no part in the worshipping of the golden calf. The women were not part of the curse that killed the Jews in the desert. Only the men died during those 40 years. Women remained alive. They entered into Eretz Yisrael. Because they refused to accept the words of these spies, their faith in Hashem was complete, solid. That's why the Arizal says, if you want to learn true faith, learn it from women. They possess a faith that cannot be shaken. These were women who were pure, and Torah wanted to have that something good should come through them. This law should be written in the Torah through their case, through them. That's why the law wasn't stated first. If it was stated in the Torah, there'd be no necessity for them to come and ask Moshe Rabbeinu this law in the first place. And this teaches us a very vital point too, that if something good is supposed to happen to someone, or in general, then that good will come through a person who is a good person, a tzadik. If something bad, an accident is supposed to happen to someone, who will cause this accident to hurt that person? One who is evil himself. Who will drive the car that will hurt somebody? A person who himself is evil. Who will bring good news? A person who himself is a tzadik. So something good will always come through a good person. Heaven will direct it that way. And something evil will come through an evil person. Secondly, it says in the Torah that the daughters of Tzlavchad came and they stood before Moshe Rabbeinu and the leaders of the Jews. Now this itself is a question. We have a very strict law which states that a person who does not stand up for a rabbi is considered a rasha, an evil person going against the Shekhinah. A person who would stand up for someone in the place of a rabbi is insulting the rabbi. How could these daughters have stood in front of the students of Moshe Rabbeinu? This is insulting Moshe Rabbeinu. Are you allowed to show kavod to the student of a rabbi right in front of the rabbi himself? This lessens the honor of the rabbi, because this means you're placing him on the same level, on the same plane as the rabbi. So how could they have stood up for the others in the presence of Moshe Rabbeinu? Even it answers that this is a law which is brought in the Shulchan. And if, let us say, there are 3 levels, there is a chief rabbi, and this chief rabbi has a student who himself is also a rabbi, and this second rabbi has students of his own, and all 3 are together. They're sitting, let's say, at a class which is being conducted by the chief rabbi, by their rabbi's rabbi. And if their rabbi is not present at the time, he happens to walk into the room then, it is forbidden for the students of that rabbi to stand up for him in the presence of his rabbi, the chief rabbi, because this would be insulting their rabbi's rabbi. They are not allowed to stand up for their rabbi, though ordinarily if they don't stand up they're considered rasha. In this case they are not permitted to stand up. But if their rabbi's rabbi, the chief rabbi, stands up for his own student as a sign of showing his high regard for him. This, of course, is done among great rabbis who stand up for each other, show regard one for another, and even for a rabbi who's beneath them. If he stands up for his student, then the students of that rabbi must stand up for him too. In this case, then, Moshe Rabbeinu was so modest and so humble that he stood for the leaders of the Jews who were his students. But he stood up for them, and that's why the daughters of Slavchad could also stand up for those students, since their rabbi stood up for them too. Moshe Rabbeinu stood up for them, they could too. But the final law is that a student cannot stand up for his rabbi in the presence of the chief rabbi, but if the chief rabbi does himself extend kavod to him, they must too. Now, as we said, the question arises, the daughters of Tzlafchad were 40 years old at the time, at least when they got married. The idea was that they would have children, and the inheritance would continue to be passed on in the tribe of Menashe. Yemena asks, what good was all this if it would seem impossible for them to give birth? Because the Yemena tells us a general physical, medical, physiological rule that the possibility of a woman giving birth, that is, a woman is not sterile. Possibility is that if a woman is married under the age of 20, then physiologically she is capable of giving birth until she is 60 years old. She starts that young, she can give birth to the age of 60. If she gets married after the age of 20, then she's able to give birth only until the age of 40 and no more. If she gets married past the age of 40, then she cannot give birth at all. In this case, the daughters of Tzlafchad were past 40. What was the use of getting married if they could not give birth anyhow? So what effect could there be? What benefit could there be through their marriage? Yemena's answer is that because they were tzidkeniot, they were very pure, very religious, their kavanah, their intentions were so pure, therefore Hashem performed a miracle for them, and they gave birth, though they were past the age of 40. Just as we find in the case of the mother of Moshe Rabbeinu, in the case of Yocheved, who was 130 years old at the time of the birth of Moshe Rabbeinu, who was far beyond the age of giving birth, Yet a miracle happened that she became younger again, with renewed youth, and was able to give birth to Moshe Rabbeinu. The same miracle happened to the daughters of Tzlachad. Very quickly, we want to point out that the Gemara says, Tosafot says, that generations pass and nature, physical nature changes. Things that before couldn't take place, today do take place in the nature of the physical body of people. That's why not all these rules today are the same as they were in the time of the Gemara. In any event, the point here is that these women were pure tzidkaniyot, and they deserve the miracle that happened to Yocheved, the mother of Moshe Rabbeinu. This miracle, which requires explanation too. There's a lot more to be spoken about this topic. We'll discuss it the next time. Meanwhile, we hope, Bezrat Hashem, we should be zocheh at this time of need for